we might turn to an explanation of Doug's technology. This is a complex area. Matt, I'll ask you for my sake, as well as some of the investors, to go slowly through this, and we might ask some questions along the way. But could you start with what seismic processing imaging is and why it's important to the oil and gas exploration sector?
So there's two types of data which is critical for oil and gas. The first is seismic and the second is well data. Seismic is your broad field data. So it could cover a very small seismic survey might be 100 square kilometres and a large seismic survey might be 50,000 square kilometres. So it's your broad expanse of data that gives you a look over a big broad area of the subsurface. Whereas well data gives you a look at a single point on the surface of the earth. And both of them are extremely important when you work the two of them together if you're an oil company. So all oil and gas exploration and all oil and gas production will use seismic data. And seismic data is processed and then it's reprocessed when you learn stuff and or bring out new technology. So it is absolutely critical to oil and gas.
Okay, can we then ask what is multi-parameter full waveform inversion imaging and how is it different from conventional seismic analysis?
So in conventional seismic analysis, which is old, right, and has had $1 squillion spent on R&D on it, and it's very accomplished and it's very good, over 60, 70, 80 years now. It takes 6 to 18 months, sometimes quicker, not often, sometimes longer, depending on the complexity of the project and the size of the project, to do a conventional seismic analysis. And with that, you are using just the primary events. So if I stand, I like to use the story of the canyon. So if I'm standing at the front of it, at the opening of a canyon, and I go cooee, I will get that first cooee back to me, and then I'll get cooee, 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 and then I'll get this whole jumble of other cooees happening at the end there. For traditional conventional processing and imaging, I will just use that first cooee that comes back. That means that everything else is noise, and noise needs to be removed from the seismic data. So I then spend a lot of time and a lot of different algorithms removing different seismic different seismic noise trains and conditioning the seismic data ready for imaging. And then I go into imaging where I make up a velocity model in a series of standard steps, which take a long time as well. And I end up with a beautiful product, to be honest. It's really nice. But when I do multi-parameter FWI, I can get out all the same outputs, because the outputs of conventional, there's probably 6, 8 standard outputs of a conventional processing flow, all of which are necessary and important to exploration and production of oil and gas. With multi-parameter FWI, I can put out all those same outputs. So multi-parameter FWI is a complete replacement for conventional processing and imaging. But now what was noise is now signal. All those multiples, all of the ghosts and all of these other pieces that make up a seismic wave field are now signal, not noise. And so we've got a lot more signal. It's just one big optimization on a massive compute. So we don't have all the decision making. We don't have a number of assumptions and approximations and workarounds we don't need them anymore. And so we've got much better physics. We've got a bigger data set because what was noise is now signal, and therefore we can get better results. And because there's much less decision making and much less man time, it's just a big computer, we could turn the projects around really quickly if we have a big enough computer.
And I think the answer was probably in what you've said, but could you just clarify the difference between single parameter and multi-parameter FWI?
So in multi-parameter FWI, in the kernel of the optimization, right? And you can think of it in terms of an AI. You can think of it like that. It's a physics-based AI, if you like. But in the kernel there, we are teasing apart different pieces of the data. So we're teasing bits of the data that will tell us about velocity, and we're pulling them away from the bits of the data that will tell us about reflections and amplitudes and so forth. And we're teasing that apart from bits of the data that will tell us about absorption. And we're pulling them apart in a really sophisticated manner in the heart of the optimization, which is the only place they can be pulled apart accurately. You know, conventional processing does this over a whole journey of 12, 18 months by hand, whereas we can do it in the heart of the optimization. Once the data has been munged together and you've got your output, you can't do it anymore because your data's all been mixed up. So with single parameter FWI, they don't pull those things apart. They're not doing that really hard work in the middle of the optimization. They're just munging it all together to get out a pseudo impedance volume. We are the people that invented that, by the way, and brought that to market like 8 years ago. And then from there, you can then derive a pseudo reflectivity volume, but neither of them are accurate. They're not accurate. So they're an add-on to a conventional workflow because they don't give you all the outputs that you need, and they're not accurate. But they are quick and they are good, but they're not a replacement for traditional processing and imaging.
Okay, I think you mentioned that this recent technological advance is relatively nascent. It's been around, I think, 2 years. Can we ask, what were you doing before? How did you grow revenue and market share as rapidly as you had? And then what's the transition like in terms of moving your revenue from what you were doing previously to MP-FWI imaging?
So before, we always had a technological advantage. We were always the first movers. We'd always think up things. So we were the first guys, as I was saying, to bring out FWI imaging, single parameter FWI imaging. We were the first guys that brought out Bayesian probabilistic machine learning for lithology and fluid prediction. We've had a number of technologies all the way along that are leading, that got copied by our competitors one way or another. So we always had that advantage, but we've been building up just the general background of our technology offering as we worked our way up the food chain in oil companies and worked our way up to bigger and bigger oil companies as well. We also cottoned on that we needed to get into the tender system, and so we needed to do all the tests. And we're the third player in the world, and so just getting yourself onto a tender list would then give you the opportunity to bid on projects. So we had this technology advantage, and we try to leverage that to get ourselves onto the tender list, and that worked well over time. It always took time, but really, to be honest, the big advantage over most of our journey is just service. It's just listening to clients and what they're really wanting, and providing better service than what our competitors are providing.
And a question that I've had a few times come over the Q&A session: can you clarify the difference between multi-parameter FWI and elastic FWI?
Yeah. So elastic FWI, this goes back to different wave types. Okay, if you look at body waves, so that's waves traveling through a body, whether it's a rock body or a fluid body, you get two different wave types. You get compression waves or P waves, and you get shear waves through rock, not through fluid. And then if you look at surface waves, because I'm sure this will come up to people's minds, then you get Rayleigh waves, which are surface waves that look like shear waves, which is your waves at the beach. Okay, so they're different. We're not talking about Rayleigh waves. We're not talking about surface waves. We're talking about body waves. So body waves, you get compression waves and you get shear waves. The conventional seismic, 99.99% of seismic is done using compression data, so P data, and that's it. There is we use shear data, but we use it in a sort of underhanded way. but we do that via compression. We only measure compression, not most of the time. We only record compression waves, and we only put compression waves into the earth. And we use this little bit of change that happens to utilize get some fluid effects out using shear. When we use elastic, however, we then fully use shear data and fully use compression data in the algorithms themselves. And that gives you elastic, and you can have elastic FWI. Now, if you've got elastic FWI, so we were first by miles bringing out multi-parameter FWI. We're still a couple of years ahead of our competitors from what they've owned up to with clients asking them. But they weren't standing still. They were working on elastic FWI. So they were working on enhancing a conventional workflow, whereas we were working on replacing a conventional workflow. The trick, of course, is to be able to do both, which is what we can do. So we now have elastic as well, and we have both single parameter elastic. We also have multi-parameter elastic. Multi-parameter elastic is not in the marketplace. It'll be in the marketplace in the next few weeks before our big conference in America, whereas elastic single parameter is. But our competitors have had it for a year or so now and have done well with it.
A question around.
I hope that adds a little bit of clarity.
I think I might need to replay this part of the video again, but no, I think it's helpful. Thank you. A question around the sustainability of the technological advantage. It sounds like different competitors are seeking to do different things. How do you see the progress that the competitors are making with elastic FWI as how does that compete with yours, and or do they also need to develop their own version of MP FWI in your view?
Oh, they've got to have MP FWI. They know it. So they've been the funny thing about national oil companies is that they will do open technology sessions with all the vendors. So we've sat in one recently, and Viridian, CGG, and Schlumberger were asked directly, when are you going to have MP FWI? You have to have it. When are you going to have it? And that's how we learned. And CGG said we should have it in 18 months. So which is quite amazing. That means we're 3.5 years ahead, indeed, if they have it in 18 months. And Schlumberger said it's still a couple of years away. So they know they have to have multi-parameter FWI. The whole world knows that it is the holy grail. It is the ultimate solution. Our elastic is now it's in production. It now needs to get tested, and we need to test it, and we'll learn stuff along the way. So we will be trailing them for a little while because they've been learning and running it for a year now. But having said that, for 2 years or 2.5 years, we've had multi-parameter out, and our teams have been working tirelessly on it. So we've tweaked it, we've tested it, we've rewritten bits of it. We've learned enormously from doing projects all around the world. So we're not standing still.
Thank you. Can I ask, what role does Doug's global network of supercomputers play in your service delivery?
Oh, they're imperative. I think for those who've been following us, you will see that we ran out of compute and we paid a fortune to get it from the cloud service providers. And then what you can buy is not the highest quality either. So you can't run everything you want to run. You know, when you build it for your own work, you shape the way you build the network, the way you might tweak the network software even, because you know how your data flows across the machines. You know the volume of data you need to get out and back across the machines. You know how the machines need to talk to one another, and you build your machine to suit exactly what we're doing. And that's at a really high level, and you just don't get that from cloud vendors. It's very difficult to get.
And do you have an estimate as to what you've spent on your supercompute capacity and storage to date?
Over the years, I think we've spent about $80 million in our 21-year history. And
to clarify, that's 80 US, I'm assuming?
Yeah, we are all US dollar company, everything in US dollars.
Okay, thank you. the preference for owning your own compute. I think you've touched on this a number of times through the presentation, but it might be worth just putting it in one answer. Your preference for owning your own compute and storage rather than using cloud-based, flexibility, optimization. What are the other reasons? What else do you get out of your own?
Well, when a client like PGS, who don't exist anymore, which tells the story, went to all cloud services, we threw a party. As soon as someone goes to cloud, you've got them, right? Because our compute will be a quarter of the price, or even the best deals you can get. It'll be as reliable, and it'll be more customized for exactly what we do, and within our control. And the thing to keep in mind is when you're using massive amounts of compute, you don't get flexibility from big cloud providers because they don't have that much compute sitting around. So you can't sort of ramp up and ramp down the way people imagine we can. You might be able to if you're using half a dozen machines, but you certainly can't when you're using thousands and thousands of machines. So if a competitor goes to cloud, then we throw a party. It's great news.
And do you have a target utilization rate for your own compute?
Yeah, because although you've got, say, 100 projects running at any one time, they don't meld out to give you equal compute load at any one time. So they have peaks and troughs in the compute load. And so you like to have on average around 80-85% compute load, and the rest as headroom, because you'll have peaks where you're running at 100%. And if you know that if you're over 80-85, your projects are being slowed down.
We've got to the end of the questions that we've written down here. Can I invite any of the research analysts, perhaps that cover Doug, to raise their hand, and you can ask questions directly over the Zoom call. I would ask if you could keep those questions suitable for a Doug 101 session rather than perhaps something that's a little bit too technical. I see Alan Franklin from Canaccord Genuity. If you could ask your question, please, Alan.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave. Hey, Matt, thanks for taking the time to run through this. A couple of ones, Matt, perhaps just on the technology change. To what extent has that changed or could change the way that you're charging for your services?
Yeah, I think that as MPFWI comes out and it is gripped and believed, and we've got clients already in this position and they see the results getting better, then we'll get more of a premium for the product. While we're still trying to grab market share with it, then we're still competing against traditional pricing models for projects. And it takes time to change that because people have budgets in place 1 or 2 years in advance. And so they need to change the budget if they're going to pay more for a project. But we think as appreciated as a premium project, we are getting more money for these projects. But it's a work in progress.
And then perhaps just continuing on the MPFWI conversation, just to what extent is there a lot of complexity across, doing it for land-based as opposed to shallow water, as opposed to deep water? And do you think you have the sort of solve for each of those?
Yeah, we work in all of those. We've got that beautiful land result we've put out, which got enormous attention. So that land one's probably a year old now. So we've done multiple land projects. Land are a lot more difficult. Doesn't matter what seismic. It doesn't matter whether we're talking conventional seismic processing or single parameter FWI or multi-parameter FWI. Land is a lot more difficult. You've got hills and mountains and sand dunes, and you've got a very changing shallow geology, which makes it very difficult. So it is more difficult. It'll take time to come to grips with that. But yeah, we've been working on all 3 of those for quite a while now.
And then just perhaps the last one, please. If you could just frame to what extent your workloads have been in existing mature basins as opposed to new exploration style basins.
Yeah. Well, most of our work would be in existing basins. In the past, we've done a lot of work in Africa and rural frontier areas. But to be honest, now we're doing more Gulf of Mexico work, more work off Brazil. We think we'll be getting a lot of work in India. India will be quite a bit of frontier work, but yeah, probably. Look, I'd have to look, but probably 80% of our work is in more traditional basins. I mean, there is a saying in the oil industry: if you want to find oil, go to where oil's been found. Go to the oily basins. You know, don't try the frontier areas unless you're really brave.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Jack Daly from Shaw and Partners. If you could go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Matt, for taking the time. You kind of at the start just talked about the pipeline being quite large. Just how could you frame around the split across MPFWI, then just a normal FWI, and I guess Elastic that you recently brought on, and how that kind of contributes to your pipeline?
We don't have. I'll answer the easy bit first, Jack. We don't have any Elastic projects because we're just it's now available for people to buy, but you start off by doing test projects for people, and that's where we're at the moment. So no Elastic revenue yet. A lot of the pipeline is in the Middle East, where it's huge land projects, and so again, we're testing MPFWI there. We do have MPFWI projects there. We have other clients elsewhere, Gulf of Mexico and other places where it's just MPFWI now. But it's, as a percentage of our revenue, it's probably not that high just yet. Maybe it's 20-25%. And but you know, it'll go up, but conventional is going up as well.
Yeah, great.
Single parameter FWI, that wouldn't be much of our. We don't even separate it out from conventional processing and imaging. To be honest, it's not much of a thing.
And is there any way you could kind of frame around the materiality of the pipeline compared to what it might have looked like in the past?
The pipeline compared with what it's been in the past is very large. Yeah. Probably don't want to say too much more than that until we get out our financials and stuff. But I have been saying all along it's really big, and a lot of the big pipeline stuff is coming out of the Middle East. But look, the market in general is really good around the world.
Great, thanks for that, Matt.
Thanks, Jack. Caleb from PAC Partners. Could you go ahead with your question, please?
Yep, thanks, Steve. Hey, Matt. So just the PGS and TGS merger, now that it's happened, I was wondering how it's impacted, I guess, the industry environment and competitive dynamics, and how that impacts client tender panels and stuff.
So it really is not going to impact us so much, Caleb, because PGS used to be a competitor maybe a decade ago, but they've really dropped out of proprietary processing. They couldn't compete. It would be very rare for us to hit them in a tender, to be perfectly honest. And so a lot of their work, I assume, therefore, was some Norwegian work where they would have got in on the ground floor and got sole source projects. But most of it was around their multi-client libraries and processing their multi-client data. So that's not us. We're not in that directly in that market. TGS, we do come across a little more in tenders, but not that much, not the major ones. And as I said before, we actually partner with them, so we do processing work for them. So I don't think that merger is that material to us, to be perfectly honest.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Caleb. Julian Mulcahy from Evans and Partners.
Matt, just a couple for me. Firstly, how is the supply chain at the moment getting computers? Because over the last year, things have been a little bit delayed. Has it sort of got to a level now where if you need more compute, you can get it fairly quickly?
We're working. Internally, we're doing a lot more work continuously, like back to pre-COVID, where we're testing new hardware all the time, where we're talking to vendors, we're optimizing code. So if we need to buy hardware in a hurry, we're ready to go. And so we're a lot more prepared internally than we've ever been. That doesn't mean we're buying hardware, it just means we're prepared. In terms of externally, I think that there's some funny holdups that we are working around. And it's around things you wouldn't expect. It's around there's a holdup around PDUs, which are power distribution units. So they're sort of like power boards, right? But at a much bigger level for a computer room. And so around that we can order some, because they're not a big ticket item. So we're trying to get a few in our back pocket, and we're also looking at, for PDUs, we're looking at a different vendor. So we need them to build us a PDU. So we've come across, for example, a PDU is a Malaysian vendor. So we've ordered one of theirs, and then we'll work through the quality of it and the durability of it. We'll get the bits we need in it. We'll work with that vendor, because we know they can supply them a lot quicker than the people in America that are making our PDUs for us at the moment. So it varies over time, but we think we can get compute reasonably quickly nowadays. Not pre-COVID quickly, but much more quickly than we have been able to get it in the last year or two.
And also the second question, given you've got a fair bit of capacity in the Houston facility in terms of space, is there any sort of thought to either renting it out or playing in using some of the compute for AI related activities for external parties?
We've had several conversations over AI and putting in a machine for AI. It's and we do a lot of AI work. We do a lot of our own AI work. A lot of our programs have AI kernels or AI pieces in them. And AI, but if you want to go for the main AI market, that's around NVIDIA, NVIDIA GPUs and specific NVIDIA machines. And bang for buck wise, they're about 4 to 5 times the cost of our machines that we put in. So if I want to multiply 2 numbers together, if I use an NVIDIA GPU, it will cost me 4 to 5 times more than if I use the machines we've been buying. So it's difficult without a client who specifically wants a massive AI load to put in NVIDIA machines, because you can't compete in what we do as our main business. But we have been working with Intel and talking to Intel as they've got more AI specific machines coming out in libraries, and we do a lot of AI work for our external HPC as a service clients, but not on a big scale. What we are looking at for the computer room in Houston is finishing the fit out of it so that we're ready for our expansion, as because when Elastic takes off, we will need more compute, but that's down the track. Right, and that's a lovely problem, but that's down the track. But we need to be ready with the computer room.
Cool. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Jack. Lindsay from Ords, if you could go ahead with your question, please.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks, Matt. So just kind of continuing on from some of the discussion we've had on this call, I suppose when talking about your technology with others in the industry, the kind of basic way this is explained to us is you would use, or companies would use, they kind of use CGG as the gold standard in the industry and would use DUG for some of your lower or kind of mid-tier use cases. Now, it sounds like from what you've said,
talking to the wrong people, Lindsay.
Okay, so yeah, so question one is, it sounds like you would disagree with the whole premise of the question, but the real question I want to ask is, even people who have gone down that line of reasoning say something along the lines of, well, the geology is actually much simpler in the Middle East than other parts of the world, and therefore DUG's entry into the Middle East should really suit them perfectly. So I guess my question is, one, do you disagree with the premise? Sounds like yes. Second question is, do you agree with the second part, which is the Middle East is kind of, that should be your kind of perfect environment?
So I think we compete. When given a level playing field against CGG, we compete really well. And there are some corner cases in basins where we haven't done a lot of work, where they will still beat us. But the vast majority of the world, we're right up there. And if anything, we can be better. And we've had lots of feedback where we're better. CGG are the IBM, and you don't get in trouble for buying IBM, and they are technically very good, and they've been technically very good for 20 years. So you can get that result that you've got there, Lindsay. But we've heard from some of the other analysts here where they've gone out to experts who say that we're leading the field and when we're taking over. So now in terms of geology in the Middle East, it has its own challenges. A lot of its challenges are around multiples, and we're very good at multiples. So multiples is where you get the seismic bouncing around in layers, and multi-parameter FWI again is really good at multiples. So yeah, I disagree with the premise. I would say that CG have been the technically leading company for a long time, but they're not now. CG would absolutely disagree with that, and you will have experts that disagree with that, but you'll have experts that support us more than CG. So we're coming. They know they used to ignore us, but they certainly don't ignore us anymore.
No, that's brilliant. And then just the second question is just on the pricing and margins for, say, MPFWI versus some of the traditional workflows. I mean, from everything you've said, intuitively, you would think you'd be able to charge an exorbitant premium, given that you can cut down timings by 3 to 10x, let's say. But my understanding is that's not really the case. So could we just talk through pricing for MPFWI and the margin profile versus your traditional workflows?
So we are, 5-6% of the market. So we're a small player with leading technology. There's this belief piece that you've got to get out there, and you've just got to do a lot of projects. And there's this whole what budget do oil companies have to do a project and so forth. And there's this whole belief piece. The technology people in an oil company are likely to believe in Doug a lot more than the asset people in oil companies. And so so the asset guys are the geologists and the people that are using the data, and they've been using CGG data for 20 years, and they've seen Doug data and they're okay with it, but you know what I mean? They don't want to compromise. And whereas the technology people will know that it's not a compromise, but they've got to sell it internally. So there's this whole process going on as we bring out MPFWI, and we do it more and more. And we've got clients now that just say it's fabulous and we just want it. And then there's other clients that are still questioning it. And of course, the backdrop to all of this is you've got companies like CGG just muddying the waters as much as they can. And we've seen internal, documents where they'll lie outright to clients, but they won't put it in the public arena. But if they're doing something that's supposed to only be for the oil company and not shown publicly, then they'll lie outright about MPFWI and what they've got and what they're doing. They'll say they do have it. They'll even call it CGG if they think the document's not going to be public. So we're in a battle. We're in a fight. Now, we're going to win the war, but we're not winning every battle. It takes time to get this through.
Yeah, brilliant. All right. Thank you very much again. That's it for me.
Thanks, Lindsay. Lachlan Wood from Wilson's Advisory, if you could ask your questions.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, Matt. I'm just going to ask on Ross's behalf because he's in commute. But just one for me, I guess, as you go from the smaller, harder tasks for a client, I guess, to the larger.
Sorry, Lachlan, you're breaking up a little bit.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
I can. Yeah.
My question was just as you go from, I guess, smaller, harder tasks to, I guess, the larger, more general tasks, just how on a project basis does that kind of change from a margin perspective?
When we do small work, we do really high-end small work and more general work, easier, harder work. But there's a really simple rule. Bigger projects make more profit. Bigger projects suit us more as well. Because we're so good at compute, we have such a lot of compute. So it's really simple. You really want to just do bigger projects. And then the secondary factor is you want to do simpler projects. So you want to do bigger projects, simpler projects. And often as you're growing, you'll get smaller projects that are more complex because they're the ones other people don't want. But what we're seeing more and more now is bigger projects, and that's what you want. They're more profitable.
Thanks. And then I guess the second question was just on Doug Nomad, just given like the pipeline opportunity you're seeing there, I guess, do you have any color on, I guess, the sales cycle and how long it would take, I guess, to fully land a client?
No, because we haven't sold any yet. I thought we would have, but we also haven't really. We're still working on getting our supply line set up to deliver them, and getting that whole business unit up and running. So, so we're a bit behind where we wanted to be, but there's a number of technical challenges we've had to overcome. And now we've just shipped our first one to America to a client for testing. And yeah, ask me this time next year. I'll certainly have a lot better answer around Nomad for you.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We've just gone through the hour. We might leave it there if that's okay. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance today. You will receive an email after this session with a link to the recording of today's webinar in case you would like to listen or watch it again. It'll also be on Doug's website. Just a quick heads up, Doug's results for the FY24 year are out on the 22nd of August. We intend to host another webinar at around 10 a.m. Perth time or midday Australian Eastern Standard Time on the day. Details will be lodged with the ASX. And then lastly, we intend to hold a roadshow in Sydney and Melbourne on the week commencing the 9th of September. We are being hosted by a number of brokers in group meetings, breakfast and lunch over the 5 days. And we will also be doing one-on-one meetings. Institutional investors that would like to participate in the roadshow are asked to reach out via email either at stevell@doug.com or investors@doug.com. Thanks very much for your attendance today, and we look forward to seeing you at results.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.